Hi guys, today we're going to talk about GDP, gross domestic production. First, what is GDP? GDP is the market value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a given period of time. Here are some points that I would like to emphasize. The first one, final goods and services. The second one, produced in a country. The last one, in a given period of time. For final goods and services, we only count final goods and services into GDP, not the intermediate goods, because we want to avoid double counting. And what is intermediate goods? Intermediate goods are goods that used for production. For example, if you're producing a car, the wheels, the engines, and other materials you use for produce a car is intermediate goods. The second one, in a country. We only cares about the place that the goods produced or the services provided. We don't care the nationality of the producer, like if it's a Chinese who produce a goods in Canada, it is count for Canada GDP. And for the last one, in a given period of time, it is usually 1 year. So how do we measure GDP? We have 3 approaches: the expenditure approach, the income approach, and the value-added approach. For the expenditure approach, it is the total spending on producing goods and services. The income approach is the total income that earned from goods and services. And the value-added approach is the difference between the cost of inputs to production and the price of output at any particular stage in the overall production process. Here's something that I want to notice is the total production is equal to total income and the total expenditure. However, there are some problems with GDP when measuring output. First one, some goods and services are outside of traditional market, which means the value of these goods and services have no money exchanged, so they are not included in GDP calculations. For example, people who plant vegetables in their own garden and just for their family to having meal, it is not counted in GDP. The second one, underground economy. It is some legal activities are hidden and some activities are illegal. The example for some illegal activities that are hidden is some people hide their activities to avoid paying taxes. And the example for some activities that are illegal is such as drug trade. Usually we want to compare GDP over time, but when comparing GDP over time, it is not accurate if both price and quantities are changing. So we have real GDP and nominal GDP. The real GDP is equals to base year price times current year quantity, and the nominal GDP equals to current year price times current year quantity. And sometimes we want to measure people's living standard through the GDP. So we have real GDP per capita. It is equals to real GDP divided population. The last one is GDP deflator. We use GDP deflator to correct the current dollar GDP values for inflation. And the GDP deflator equals to nominal GDP divided real GDP. And the last thing I want to talk about is an example showing that how to calculate GDP. I'm sorry for the typing error. And assume that there are only 2 goods, coffee and wheat, are produced in an economy. The following table shows price and quantity of 2 goods in 2018 and 2020, and we consider 2018 as the base year. The first question is the value of GDP in 2018. We know that GDP equals to price times quantity, and it says 2018. So we have coffee's price and coffee's quantity in 2018, and wheat's price and wheat's quantity in 2018. It is equals to 50 plus 32 is 82. And for the second question is, what is the value of GDP in 2020? It is as same as the first question, but it just counts for 2020. So we have GDP equals to price times quantity in 2020. It is equals to the coffee price and the coffee quantity in 2020 plus the wheat price times wheat quantity in 2020. It is 48 plus 22, so it is 70. For the third question, is that the real GDP in 2020, and we consider 2018 as the base year. So we know that real GDP equals to price in base year times quantity in current year. So we have base year price of coffee is 5 times current quantity of coffee is 12 plus base year price of wheat times current quantity of wheat. It is 60 plus 44 is 104. So this is the example that's showing the calculation of the GDP. Hope that I have clearly explained how to calculate GDP. And thank you for watching the video.